China should abolish the one-child policy. As a Chinese view, I'm going to tell you the miserable story of myself and I'm going to win the debate. So firstly, the policy in China, current one-child policy in China is like this. If you have more than one child, you have to have more than one child, the government are going to fine you. The government are going to dismiss you if you are employee of the public sectors like the university, the military, the government, and so on. Or even more radically, the government are going to sterilize you if you cannot pay the fine, which my partner will tell you more about. So basically, I have three arguments to make in my speech. Firstly, why giving birth to children as much as they want, as many as they want, is a basic human right. Secondly, why by abolishing this policy we will not see a rapid increase of the Chinese population, which will not cause a problem for China. And thirdly, why the aging society now is a problem for China when we have this one-child policy. And my partner will tell you why this policy is unequal in the first place for people from poor area and rich area, and how this could cause the damage to the family who lose the grandchild and the negative effect of the personality of the children. So firstly, my first argument. Why it is a basic human right to give birth to children as many as they want? Because we say reproducing or giving birth to children is a basic human nature, a basic human intrinsic ability. So first question is, what is wrong when we exercise this ability as a human being? We say this is a huge violation of human rights because family is our basic social is an important form of social relation for us. So I think we think that people have the right to have the family according to their own will and to decide how many family members they want to have. So we believe that this is an intrinsic pleasure for people to have the family, and we think that the relationship between parents and the children is the best and the closest relationship among human societies. So we think that it is a basic human right to have the family and they want. More importantly, for parents, especially parents in China, children become their psychologically dependent as well as financially dependent when they get older. So we think the problem is even more outstanding when these families suddenly lose their only children when the parents get old and have no ability to produce and have another one, which my partner will tell you more about. So that's why we first discovered the basic human right. Secondly, I'll tell you why this will not increase the Chinese population rapidly. We believe that obviously the opposition side will say, hey, your policy is going to increase the population of China. We say, no. So I'm going to tell you why overnight in the 1980s, the China's population has doubled or even tripled, increases so rapidly. That is not because we don't have this policy. That is because we have some wrong policies at that time. We are fooled by our leaders. That's the truth. In the 1960s, our leader told us more people means more power, and when you have more power, we have enough ability to fight against the Soviet Union. So that is say the government encouraged you to have more children. But this is not important. It's not the most important. More importantly is we have the financial foundation at that time, because we have a very strange policy at that time. Because we know that we do not have at that during the 1960s we do not have the free market economy. We have regulated economy. So everything is distributed by the government, the food, the clothes, and other resources. So at that time, the resources in China are distributed according to the capitals in your family. That means when you have more children, you get more resources. The state will be responsible to raise them. So for that, people in that time, there's no economic concern, there's no financial burden for them. They just have as many children as they want. So that is the reason that caused the sudden or rapid increase of China's population. And that is the real reason of China's overpopulation. But now it's different. We don't have the regulated economy anymore, and we don't distribute our resources according to the capital in your family. Now we say people are rational, right? So the living expenditure in China, especially in Beijing where I study, is very, very high. So when parents give birth to another children, they will consider whether I can afford this children, whether I can provide them with qualified education and living. So that means now people are themselves will control the population. So the population in China are not likely to go high rapidly. People now are rational enough to control the population. More importantly, even if we have a large population, it's still not a problem. Why? Because when we consider the population density, Japan and Singapore have larger population density than China. Even though China have very big population, but we have big land, we have more resources than Singapore and Japan. We believe our population density is less than Japan and Singapore. So we believe that with the development of economy, with the increasing of China's power, we say that we will solve this problem very well, like Japan and Singapore. What's up?
So first of all, overpopulation accounts for the shortage of drinkable water quantity in China. The Chinese people are suffering. What are you trying to do is you want to add more people and more demand.
We're suffering is because we don't have that high level of economy like Japan and Singapore. We believe that with the development, we will reach a higher standard which can match the situation in Japan and Singapore, where the population density is even larger than that in China. So we don't think, even if there is slight growth of population, we don't think that is a problem of China. So thirdly, the problem of Asian society. The problem of Asian society is very severe. It's very severe now for China because China has used up its demographic dividend. What is demographic dividend? Is that this demographic dividend have boosted China's economy in the past because we have cheap labor, provide with you guys with the cheap products made in China. So that boosted China's economy. But now it's not the case because the population at my father's age, the main body of the labor of my father's generation now is going to aging. So we have insufficient labor now. So that is to say, the companies like Adidas and Nike move their factories in Vietnam, and you have your clothes made more like in Vietnam than in China. That is to say, labor in China is going to be more and more expensive, especially when the social welfare are not good enough to support all the older people. All the financial burden will put on the young people. The two couple of us will support 4 old people now, like in China, especially when the social welfare is not well enough to provide support to them. So the financial burden, as well as other psychological burdens for Chinese young people, are even heavier than before. So that is the problem of the Asian society. So basically, there are 2 reasons. Firstly, it's a basic human right. Secondly, abandon this policy will not increase rapidly the Chinese population. Thirdly, Asian problem is really a problem for China.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now I invite the leader of the opposition, House, to destroy the journalist state.
As the government of a country that consists of millions and millions of people, you cannot escape the responsibility of tomorrow by evading it today. The Chinese government should remain strong in support of the one-child policy. That's basically the stance coming from open opposition. We see sometimes government acts as the unglorified hero of a nation. Sometimes they have to take on something that the people does not recognize that they are doing, or most of the times they do things that people don't really know that has no answer to. Sometimes government really can't find the answers to everything, but what they do is they go with the best option available at the current status or under status quo. We believe that under status quo, prevention right now is the best approach. Just how we like to prevent cancer by changing our eating habits, or how to prevent STDs by using contraceptions, or frostbites just by staying warm in here. We think it's simple. Prevention is better than curing it at the symptoms, right? We think that preventing it by the roots is the way to go in today's debate. Now, before that, I want to say, I want to address some kinds of policies that have been shown to prove that rewarding systems do not work, that sometimes we have to resort to punishment theories. Because we believe that we've seen cases in Singapore where they are underpopulated, what the government tries to do is they end up sponsoring a love boat for couples, for single people to enter and hopefully would hook up and mate for their country. When they have babies coming out of these couples that goes into the love boat, these couples gain extra privileges in society. Apparently, this remains idealistic, right? These kinds of rewards do not allow people, or do not allow the policies of governments to achieve. That's why we'll have to resort to punishment methods or maybe penalties for that sake. But before that, a few rebuttals coming from opening opposition. First of all, they talked about basic human rights, how everyone should be able to populate as much as possible. So here's the idea of basic human rights. You are entitled to basic human rights as long as you do not harm the rights of other people, or as long as you do not hurt the government or its functionalities within society. That's when the government gives you the basic human rights. But firstly, what happens in overpopulation? There are lots of people in a country which sometimes are unidentified with the consensus or with the census of the country. Most of the times, you only have 70% of the nation paying for taxes, but at the end of the day, the government needs to use that 70% of these taxes they are only able to collect to provide for all the 100% of these people that are actually going under in overpopulation. This is where they harm the society as a whole. We have people who can pay taxes. We have people who don't have to pay taxes. At the end of the day, they fail to recognize about this kind of tax problems and how overpopulation actually harms others as well. Now, they claim that they were fooled by the leaders. We don't think statistics do lie. Right now, China is with the most population in the world, with the second as India. We don't think statistics lie. We don't think that poverty in parts of China do lie. We don't think that excessive competition of having kids studying from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. in the evening lie about the competition that is necessary within the great population or the overall population problem within China. On the second rebuttal, about how they talked about why overpopulation would not occur, the only reason coming from him was that people are rational. Just because people are rational does not mean they would not populate more. If I am rational, it simply means that I can justify myself why I want to have 20 kids if I can. It does not mean that just because I am rational, that means that I would only have 1 kid or 2 kids for that matter. Sit down please after rebuttals. Now, on the third rebuttal, he gave you this label of how it causes damage on family of childhood loss. I heard nothing about that. What we heard was something about economic boost, how underpopulation would eventually raise the price of labor workers. Well, we don't think that this idea is true, because as long as your nation does not develop with a limited budget of a government, people would not pay more to hire incapable workers to work for you at all. So at the end of the day, we think that this boost of economic argument does not stand in today's debate. Go.
You say that the problem of underpopulation. So you predict our consequence of underpopulation. So what's the point of giving this one-child policy anymore?
So we never predicted a problem of underpopulation in the first place. I never told you that China would go under population. I was merely giving you an example of how Singapore failed to use their governmental reward policy system to promote population or to promote population in their country. Basically, we think you got that idea wrong. Now, moving on to 3 arguments coming from our side. Firstly, we want to talk about how government intervention is actually justified. Secondly, we want to talk about how this may enforce more gender equality. And then thirdly, we want to talk about how women who are forced into abortion, who constantly complains about that government forcing me to abort, or that males complain about I was forced to be sterilized. We think that those are people with informed choices to start with, and they do not have the rights to complain for that matter. Why is government intervention justified? Firstly, the role of the government is to find food for people to eat, to give you a roof to sleep under, to provide education or public services. When there are too many people, you simply can't manage these amounts of population. Too many people results in more polluting, more services, and more products needed. But then again, not all people can even pay taxes to start with. Yet limited budget has to cover this entirety of the population. Now, it results in an even more psychologically unhealthy competition, and as I've stated in the first place, about how you force these kids to compete just to get a single breath of education from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. We don't think that is a good lifestyle for that matter. Now, expectations from government, yet we don't have cooperation from people to start with. Now, we can never have a functioning government when the people do not cooperate, right? Now, moving on to my second argument, how it enforces more gender equality. We think that there are two cases with this one-child policy. One, you get a child you don't want, you get probably a male or a female. Traditionally, Chinese people believe that getting a male is prosperous to their country, but we think that this is a psychological fallacy coming from their side. It's basically an appeal to traditional values, right? We don't think that in today's society, where men and women can actually be equal, you cannot actually choose which kind of. Eventually, if you have that unwanted children, basically the role of the government or the role of the law dictates that you abide by not killing your child. Eventually, if the mother or the father are willing to raise you up in a family, to give you food, to find education for you, at the end of the day, that shows that they give you adequate love enough for you to function as a rational human being and to perform as an individual in society. And we think that this would lead to further trends of change in perspective of the value of one single gender. For all these reasons, we believe that opposition case stands.
Please welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to defend the government.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Speaker, we basically heard from the opposition side, they're saying like China has already have so many population, and if we loosen the policy and we abolish the policy, the Chinese population will increase and explode in a rapid way. But my partner has already explained that why this is not going to happen. Firstly, the argument is like the government is justified to intervene in this issue because they say that the government need to give the rules. But we say that there are so many population. It's not caused. The status quo now is not caused by the large amount of population. It is because that Chinese economic development is not that fulfilled. We still need to improve our economic development because we see the example like the population density in Japan and in Singapore is huge. It's much larger than in China. So the problem now is not caused by the population. And this is within the, and also, even if this happen, my partner has already explained that why people are not gonna, the population is not gonna increase in that rapid and even explode, because people will consider their own situation if they have the choice to choose, if they have the opportunity to choose, because they will think that whether they will have the certain condition to afford another child or not. But at least we need to give them the choice, give them the opportunity to choose. The second rebuttal is like they mentioned the gender equality in this case, which we see is really not the case, because they are actually causing gender inequality. They are trying to say every family should only have one child. That means that because already the things that happen in China is like if the people are more favorable of boys rather than girls. So if you actually have the first baby as the girls, actually the government is forcing the women to abort, to give up the girl and to have another boy, which we think that the gender inequality actually happened here. So we really think that they are adding the problem to the status quo. Now I'll come to my argument, and I'll mainly talk about, firstly, the inequality that caused by the one-child policy, and second, under the status quo of the aging society, there are lots of parents who suddenly lost their child and they actually suffer. The third is like the education and formation of the characteristics of the child is really the problem here. Firstly, we talk about the inequality that happened in China, because the policy of the one-child policy is saying like in urban areas, in the rich family actually can, if they have more money, then they can actually buy another maybe for 100,000. more than 100,000, they can buy another child. But for those poor families, they actually living in the urban areas, that if they want another child, they under the status quo that they need to have abortion, or they are actually forced to have the sterilization in the status quo. So in this case, we see that it is unjustifiable for those women who really want another child, because we are actually harming their basic human rights of planning their own family format. We're actually preventing them from creating their own family, but only influenced by the policy provided by the government. And after they have some people, after they have the second child, they either need to be punished for a lot of fine, or they will be dismissed from the government from the work they has already been in and has already been worked for a long time. And also, if they have the second child, they wouldn't have some kind of 户口, which is the registered permanent residence for those child. So these child, especially the second one, is not being recognized by the society. When they need to go to school at the age of 5 or 6, they don't have their kind of registered registered resident in their family and even in the community. So this is really harmful, we believe that, because they have no money to depend on, and they have no welfare provided from the society. It's really bad for their survival, even for their survival. And also for those middle class people, they're kind of have been squeezed by the policy in the very middle, because they need to spend super high money if they want to have the second child. We are actually depriving their basic human rights of having a child. Okay.
Prove to me why simply rationality would decrease or would stop the growing trend of overpopulation.
Actually, my partner has already explained to you, because people will think about whether I'm affordable of having another child. He has already explained. I don't need to do that. The second argument is that, especially in the aging society, we see now in China's status quo that there are many old people over 50 years old that they lost their child suddenly because of accident, because of illness. Then they actually really suffer in this case, because they have no ability. They are not capable of having another child, and they are under the pressure of supporting themselves in the society. They are already those ones who have less money and need to be taken care of by their children at a specific age. Well, at the same time, they have nobody to taken care of, and they have nobody to take care of. They don't even have a person to talk about. Therefore, we can see in the status quo that there are already more than 1 million family that is experiencing this kind of losing their child at relatively old age. And in this case, since they don't have the only child to rely on, therefore they need to rely on the society. But we now see the society is not that well equipped and is not effective in helping those aging people. Therefore, we believe that we need to help those aging people to have their choices of choose to have 1 children or more. This third is like actually these people and these children, especially when they are cultivated, they are the only children in their family. They are actually the center of their family, the king of the family. Every family member surrounded him. Therefore, we call these kind of children become relatively selfish. And at the same time, they have nobody to talk to, especially not anyone that is within their same age, because there are really a huge age gap between different generations of persons. Since they have nobody to talk to and nobody to resort to, they will spend more time online and resort to alcohol or something like that, which I think is really bad for them. This is the time that's provided specific for those people to communicate, to learn to communicate, and learn to care about each other, not be so lonely and selfish. Therefore, we're very proud to propose.
Now please welcome Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
One problem that the proposition side did not do in this debate is that they forgot to contextualize what exactly is the consequence of their paradigm, because we say that the government cannot equip every individual in society with rationality.
Get here.
Once the government gives people more freedom and choices, it doesn't mean that they would necessarily choose to only have one children, when actually the perception of Chinese people is to have many children because they like big family. But ladies and gentlemen, on the second problem that we see is that we see that they claim that children who are born with no sibling at all can be called have a symptom of this disorder, which is such a Wikipedia-based argument, right? We think that those kind of things is not justified in this debate, because we think that when you're born with no siblings at all, it is even better for yourself because you have more incentives to actually interact with the society outside. But not only that, ladies and gentlemen, honestly, the third problem that they have failed to actually recognize is that they try to compare China with Singapore and Japan. We don't think that is justified, because Singapore and Japan started out with the majority of the population was already literate. No offense to China, but ladies and gentlemen, there's still farmers, there's still people who suffer to actually pursue university or actually skills in this debate. We don't think that it's better for China to actually go with other countries' policy. The fourth problem that they forgot to recognize is that they claim that it's problematic for these people who actually arbitrarily decide themselves that they want to break the state law and actually and have the second child be fined and actually dismissed from the choice from their job. But ladies and gentlemen, they did not forget that these people are not forced to actually choose that choice. Ladies and gentlemen, once they have a baby, it's already an informed choice. They are not forced to do so. And the fact that they are dismissed from the state-run sectors is even better, because it shows that the state upholds the sanctity of the laws. But on the fifth point, ladies and gentlemen, when they say that the purpose of having children is only because to enslave them so that they can take care of their parents when they're old, we don't think that that's the case, right? We think that the state already provides a house for old people in this paradigm. We don't think that the state actually neglects to actually give the retirement money or reserve money to the old people. First point, ladies and gentlemen, why is it within the best? Why the one-child policy is the best tackle to social issues? We recognize that not everyone is rational in society, right? That's why you see people breaking laws. That's why you see people killing themselves or committing suicide all the time. But we also recognize that the social issue in China is that they're suffering with poverty, ladies and gentlemen. And with their paradigm is that they want to empower the landlords and manufacturer owners. They want this landlord to actually be able to reduce the salary of their laborers. Because when the labor market expands, consequently what's going to happen is that there'll be more competition for jobs. Now it's all about who offers themselves at the lowest cost, right? So on the B point, recognize that when kids will have less incentive to go to school, because now their top priority is about finding money. So China will suffer the dropout rates of their kids from school, and we don't think that is the best. That is within the best interest of the Chinese society, right? These kids will strive for money first and then education second. Second point. Why one-child policy is the best tackle to environmental issues? Ladies and gentlemen, don't you ever forget that, ladies and gentlemen, that when you are within one land, you have to live upon the resources within those lands. What we've seen in China currently, ladies and we've seen the drinkable water quantity shortage. We've seen the deforestation. The Sichuan forest, which is actually the closed forest in China, ladies and gentlemen, now becomes the world's 10th most threatened forest region in the world, ladies and gentlemen. And we also see that Chinese people are suffering from the desertification from farmlands because of their overpopulation, which requires more resources. We don't think that should be the case, right? Because when they allow people to have more, when they allow people to actually more and more people in the market, we think that the price will become higher because the resource in the country, domestic resource, will not be able to actually account for the population of the country. But China will now have to increase the export rate, which will actually come with the price of those necessary products. Just like in Thailand, where natural gas is actually have to be exported from Burma because Thailand is overpopulated. But ladies and gentlemen, we don't want China to suffer the same thing. On the third point, I would like to explain to you about why this will harm the international relation if China will actually abolish this policy. But before I move on to this point, step yourself.
The problem of population is caused by the underdevelopment, the lack of good technology. So please explain us why Japan, with larger population density, can solve the problem better than China.
Sir, of course, because they have technology, because they have educated people now. But sir, not to mention the crisis that they're going through right now, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that the population density, if one country possesses it, we don't think that China should in this debate, right? Because China doesn't even have enough budget to actually provide free whole education for their individuals. They don't have the budget to actually subsidize the green technology in their country. We don't think that China is ready. Not today, not tomorrow, not until they're ready. So on the third point, why abolishing one-child policy will actually harm the international relation of China with neighboring countries, right? We recognize that when the problem of overpopulation in China doesn't only stay within their territory, we recognize that it causes the influx of Chinese migrants to other neighboring countries, right? We've seen that Australia had to impose the White Australia policy just to intentionally restrict Asian people, but particularly Chinese people, to actually leave their have a certain boundary for their own local people. Because there's such a huge influx of these people. The poor people in their status quo cannot even afford to actually bear with their hard life now, ladies and gentlemen. So we actually see the example of Turkey actually raging over international arena when the refugees from Syria actually fluxing into their country. We don't want China to actually go on the same path because we want to uphold the best interest for its international relation, and we also want to uphold the best interest for the social and also economic issues that haven't been tackled by the government yet. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to go for a prosperous country, if you want to see Chinese kids growing up with education, if you want to see the literacy rate in China growing, go with the opening opposition. Thank you.
China definitely should abandon the one-child policy because it is creating a huge harm in the Chinese society and it has many bad consequences. But first, I will have to explain some things to the side opposition. The side opposition still does not understand how people will control themselves. How, if we abolish that policy, how people will not have more children. But I'm telling you that the social image of China is different than it was 30 years ago when this big boom was happening. And nowadays, Chinese people have to look carefully how they will spend their money and how they will plan their family. And many of them do not have the economic capability to have a big family, and therefore they will not decide for it because, as I said, the society in China is much different now than it was before. And the side opposition was talking about the environmental issues, how the Chinese policies helping to save the environment. But ladies and gentlemen, if you want to save our environment, we have to look to the other things. So we have to start with the industry and things like that. The industry is polluting the most, and do not tell me that if there wouldn't be one-child policy, the Chinese environment will go completely green. But that is completely not true. We have to save the environment elsewhere where it is more important, and definitely not here.
Sir.
And, no, thank you. And we were talking about the sexual structure. But now I will also expand and think of what will happen with what is happening actually with the Chinese social structure now. You see, the child, the son, is more valued in Chinese society than a girl. And therefore, mothers and fathers do various things to get rid of those little girls just so they can have a boy. And not only that, they actually kill babies, but they also, no thank you, but you see, the abortion in China is illegal. And because those mothers, when they find out that they're going to have a girl, they want to have an abortion because they want a boy. And this leads to back alley abortions, and a lot of mothers die because of this. And yeah, about the sexual structure, you see, even now there are more men in China than women. And research shows that in 8 years, 40 million Chinese men will not be able to marry women because, well, there wouldn't be any women left to marry.
Sir.
No, thank you. And as I said, the ratio is 40 to 60 men to women, and things are getting even worse. And this definitely doesn't lead to gender equality because, as the side proposition said, but it leads to inequality in numbers. But also, no, thank you. But also, no, thank you. But also, you see, even now, the son is more valued. And if this policy will stay as it is, the sons, the males, will be even more valuable because you can only have one, and you want to have son. And the fathers and mothers prefer to have sons also because they want to ensure the economic, no thank you, the economic prosperity of the family for the later years. And now I'll talk about a very important thing that we are going to bring to this debate and also extend to the first government has mentioned something. I'll talk about age structure. No, thank you. What will happen with the age structure in China? What is happening now, actually? You see, nowadays, we have a lot of population from the Middle Ages. You see, they are in their Middle Ages, and they were born in the big boom in the 70s and the 80s. And you see, these middle-aged people are capable of sustaining the retired people and the children because this middle part is so big. And now China has two choices: either to abandon the one-child policy, and then you see the pyramid, the structure between ages will be like that. There will be not the same, but a similar amount of young, old, and the middle-aged people. And so the middle-aged people will still be able to sustain to pay for the pensions of the retired and to pay for the schools of the youth, because that is how welfare state goes. But no, thank you. But if you do not abandon one-child policy, you see, in 30 years of time, we will have an extremely small middle-aged group, because only one child can be born, and we will have an extremely large amount of people who will be old in 20 years, because they are from the generation that was born in the big boom. And tell me, how will this, no, thank you, that middle-aged population sustain the elderly people? Well, that will lead to the collapse of Chinese society. No, thank you. No, thank you. And yeah, because well, at least the welfare state will go down because from the wages that the workers are paying, the government will not be able to sustain pensions and education for those people. And another aspect we'll talk about is that elite in China has different rules than the rest of the people. You see, from years from 2000 to 2005, in the Hunan province, about 2,000 children were born. Of course, you already have 2 or more children. And you see that elite is ignoring those rules, and the population, the other population of China, is actually losing respect in the elite, and they are losing the respect in the whole in the government, because in its officials, because the government officials have different rules than the rest of the population, and this is creating a social unrest in China, and it can lead to very bad consequences because the Chinese people are losing faith to the elite because it has different rules than the rest of the people, and because all those reasons we have listened to you. Because what will happen with the section structure, what will happen with the age structure, and the elite is ignoring the rules, and we have already proven that the population of China will not radically increase if we abandon one-child policy. Please propose.
I invite the members of the opposition to give me perspective of their case.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we've heard quite a lot of very convincing arguments from both sides on this very interesting topic of China's one-child policy. Thank you. But today there are a couple of main issues I've identified, which have been pointed out on both sides from different perspectives, and I'd like to just go through them through the third speaker of the proposition speech. Outline these problems, show you why the opposition has the upper hand on this, and then I'd like to expand upon our case with the analysis of the economical changes that we could expect if we remove the one-child policy. Now, first off, the first problem that the proposition kept bringing up within their speech is if this would really increase the amount of children born, and whether or not this will, well, first off, it will definitely raise the amount of children, because there are sort of ideas of mentality and how people will just know how to not have more children is absurd. Because first off, the people that, because of money issues, first off, the people that right now can afford one child will continue to have one child, and the people who could afford more children, and if they want more children, they're going to have more children. And so that's definitely not a point that this will not double the number of people, because it definitely will. Because if people want more children, the only thing holding that back is the current rule. And then the second point is, why is overpopulation such a problem? Because you keep saying that it's not. Well, first off, I have a quote from the SUNY College of Environmental Studies, which clearly states here that overpopulation is the main problem of today's society. And that's because of one simple fact. Today, we have nearly or around 7 billion people on the planet. Of that, China has 1.3 billion people, so that's almost a fifth of the world's population. Now that's bound to leave a mark on both our environment and our economy. And if we have a country, and they kept talking about how their density is lower than Japan's. Well, first off, that's because Japan has a quite smaller amount of land, and the other problem here is urbanization, because most people keep moving to the cities, and cities keep expanding, so the amount of population and the amount of problems that are contained in a smaller area, therefore increasing them more. So density doesn't really play a factor when you have large open wide spaces with no people living in them, because the main problems happen in the cities where there are so many people. Then the next point they talked about is the justification, whether or not the government has the right to take to take this. Well, first off, here I'd like to just rebut the points about abortion, because the fact is infanticide is illegal, and it is illegal for the government to make you have an abortion, so it's your informed choice to have a child, and therefore it is completely preposterous to claim this. And also the point is the government should take care of the many. So if because overpopulation is such a problem, it affects, there's so many people in that small area, then the government has to think about how the entire society is going to survive, not that you want, a boy and a girl instead of just a boy or just a girl. The next point we talked about is the environment, which I find that that's a very good point, because statistics clearly show that since the time that China has implemented this policy, it has dropped its CO2 emissions by 1.3 billion tons. And that statistic for me saved 1.3 billion tons of CO2 emissions. And that, I believe, is quite a large number that has stopped some of the global warming issues. Not to mention that more people mean more cars, more homes, more larger cities, and so on and so forth. But before I continue.
Yeah, but China started implementing other green technologies in the period that has...
Yes, thank you, sir. Green technologies, again, have quite not as much impact as the fact that you have 400 million less cars that one might have, 400 million less homes that one might have, and that's the main issue here. Then the next point we talked about is the sort of gender structure and mentality, and here's where I'd like to expand upon that a bit more. Now, we talked about how the gender structure is shifting, and personally I think that those 20 or 30 million men that won't be able to marry aren't really that much of a problem, and also that the policy itself has started, changing the mentality, so that before it was agreed upon that, let's say, boys were more favorable and that girls weren't so favorable, but now, with this policy, you get what you get, and people, so to speak, and people are starting to accept that. People are starting, especially more in urban areas, don't really care what they get, because it's this sort of change in mentality is bringing about a more accepting society. And as far as the point of the age structure brought about by the third speaker of the prop, well, the thing is, yes, there will be a change in the age structure, but that is, if I'm not mistaken, the main goal of, getting rid of the population. It is like limiting the population. Thank you. To have less, newborns, and to have, in the end, like after one generation, once, we have more new kids, and once time passes, we'll have more or less a more straightforward pyramid, and that won't be such a problem, and besides, overpopulation is a much bigger problem than this. And now the final point I'd like to touch upon, which I've already kind of talked about, is the economic aspects that will happen to individuals. Well, the fact is, it's been proven that the GDP has risen by 10 per person, like in an urban area, tenfold since the introduction of this policy. And then if we limit the population, we have more job applications for people, which in the end isn't such a bad thing. If there's less cheap labor force, that's, I think, good for the people of China, because they have larger wages, and that's good. If I'm not mistaken, you have more jobs, you have less competition for those spaces in education institutions, because more than 1,000% applied to a university and only a small fraction got in, so that's a good point. And also on the individual side, it will encourage the older people we kept talking about to start saving for themselves and to have monetary initiative on their own instead of relying on their children apparently. And it will also provide more, it also provides more money to the younger people who have more money if they don't have 2 or 3 children. And because of all of these changes, because if we got rid of this policy, this would create a huge imbalance. And because of all of the positive things I've shown you, this is why we should oppose.
And then last speaker of the government house to sum up.
So, we're at the point when you have no perfect solution. No one of that solutions is perfect. Abandon one-child policy or not to abandon one-child policy. No one of that solutions is perfect. Every one of that solutions has some good sides and has some bad sides. And the side proposition, the government today will try to prove you that that abandoning one-child policy does more good than harm to China. And the side government, I will represent you why the government is right and why the abandoning one-child policy is the right choice for China. So, my speech will consist of two parts. In first part of my speech will be a refutation of their arguments, their supports, and second part of my speech will be the so-called reply speech. So I'll try to give you another view to entire debate. So let's move to the refutation part. Yeah, you were trying to say that if we not abandon one-child policy will definitely raise the amount of children. And what we're trying to prove you that was will maybe raise the amount of children, but for a very little number, because that demographic explosion was the huge issue in 60s and 80s. That's what the first proposition was representing to you, not right now. And the first proposition today trying to prove you that even if we will abandon that one-child policy, that this demographic explosion won't be so huge that it will be so problematical, and that because of that it's justified to have it more, to still have it. So when we're trying our extension, we explained to you that people now in China started to plan their family, and if they can afford more, children, they will have more children. But if they cannot, they won't have. And then you said that the government should take care of the many, so the government should take care of their people, and that's exactly what we are trying to prove you. Government should take care of their people, and one-child policy is not the right solution to take care of their people, because the problem maybe isn't now, the problem will be in 10 years or 20 years in the future. Because if the government should take care of their people, and in 20 years we'll have a large amount of old people. So we need to take care of them. No thank you. We need to take care of them, of that old people. And if we'll have one-child policy, we'll eventually, in future, we'll have a very little number of young people and a huge amount of old people. So how that small amount of young people take care of that huge amount of old people? That's impossible. No, thank you. And that's how and that's not how the systems work today. And then he said that China dropped CO2 emissions since they abandoned one-child policy, but we don't really think that that's the point. No, thank you. That is the point of that one-child policy. We believe that that's the point of green technology and going green, and we believe that abandoning that one-child policy isn't the main reason why they dropped CO2 emissions. So now I move to the three clashes. So I found three clashes in this debate, and the first clash was balance in society. The second clash was the rights, and the third clash was the implementation or the use of the one-child policy in that system. So let's move to the first class, to balance in society. But before that, yes, please.
So your team's extension on the value of abortions and the existence of gender inequality. How does banning the one-child policy change anything if the value of the people remains the same?
The problem isn't the value of the people. The problem is what is happening with their children right now. And if you have an option to have, for example, 4 children in China, you won't kill your first girl, won't you? Will you? So, about balance in society. You said that balance in society doesn't matter so much, and that even if we won't have good balance in society, it's still better because we'll have less people. But we don't agree with that. We think that we're really ruining sexual structure and we're really ruining age structure, and that's not good. Because with sexual structure, another problem is because we're playing God on that point. Because with that one-child policy, we're playing God, and all the changes which includes population are long period changes. You can change population from today to tomorrow, and that's a problem. Because the problem about the sexual structure is the equality in the society. The problem of age structure is, as was represented, no, thank you. But by our second speaker is that the country won't be able to function anymore. Because we have to take care of the old people in the country. We have to take care of the old people in the country. And we'll have a large amount of old people and a small amount of young people. Young people cannot take care of the older people, so the country cannot take care of the older people. And the whole concept of welfare state fell on that point. And that's why we believe that that's not a good solution. No, thank you. Then another case was about rights. Because you believe, the side, the opposition today believe that it's not justified for the country to do that. That is justified for that is justified to the country to have one-child policy. But we believe that the country can take such a radical policy because there are also other options, as our second government today represented in our extension. So that in Thailand and in Indonesia, he said that they set the problem on another way. They set the problem with education. They set the problem with contraception. They set the problem with planning the family. And that's what we believe that is one of the solutions, and is a much better solution than one-child policy. And then the third clash was the use of that one-child policy in the very system. And you said that we said that there is a problem how this system is implemented in Chinese society and how this system is actually functioning in China. But you said, yeah, the use of the system isn't such a problem. It's a problem of China. But yeah, of course it's a problem of China. We're talking about China, and we're talking about the boys and girls and abortions. Because the problem is that the China society isn't ready to have that one-child policy. Because we have a lot of killing, we have a lot of murders of little girls, we have a lot of abortions, and that's what we believe that this is one of the negative consequences there. And because of all these reasons, I believe that we proved you that why should we abandon one-child policy.
And now please welcome the last speaker of the debate, the opposition group speaker.
Good evening, everyone. Okay, I'd like to deliver this debate in 3 basic points, within which I'll also present my refutations. So first I'm going to talk about, is this policy important and why? Then secondly, I'm going to talk about, the imperfections mentioned about this policy from side proposition. Then I'm going to talk about the justification, and in the end I'm also going to talk about, some other solutions and things like that. Okay, so let's start. Is this policy important? We think this is extremely important. Why? Because overpopulation is a big problem, and this is a solution. Now, why is overpopulation still, not just in the 60s, a big problem? First of all, it causes an enormous ecological disaster. Now, our second opposition already presented to you how many billions of CO2 we've already saved with the one-child policy. Not to mention that more people would be exploiting, would be getting bigger production, etc., etc. So, of course, this is a big income to global warming, which is a big contributor to climate change, which is a contributor to river regime and rainfall change, which causes an agricultural disasters, especially to countries which are dependent on rivers, like, Huanghe, China. So this would be a huge ecological disaster that might also cause conflicts over drinkable water, possible war, etc., etc. Not to mention it would also be a social disaster, an economic disaster, as presented by by Peter before me. Okay, so now let's talk about the supposable imperfections of this policy as presented from side proposition. First, we heard a lot about human rights and forced abortions and family planning, and that everyone should be able to do that. But we think there are more important things. How about right to health and right to education, along with all the other social services that one needs to get? And how about ultimately the right to life that no one on the planet will have once we're completely overpopulated and destroy it? Not to mention, of course, this kind of policy could bring more epidemics, slums. As I mentioned, no more, social services, free education, things like that. So we think no, thank you. We think that. No, thank you. About abortions, we of course explained how they're illegal and it only needs stricter regulations. And we think that all of these things, the regulation of, the intervention in family planning is simply a small sacrifice we need to make for the greater good. Okay, we also heard a lot, no thank you sir, about gender inequality and gender structure. Now, about gender inequality, I'd like to point out that now that women are not simply viewed as in the past when they were viewed as simple caregivers for the 6 children that they had, now that women can also focus on career and also be a contributor to the country's GDP. So how about this? This is a point that also contributes to gender equality. Not to mention, if we talk about gender structure, I'd like to mention that the problem is actually in the mentality of people, and this is a problem that can be solved within the implementation of this policy. We can still have this policy, but solve the mentality of the people for them to be satisfied when they get a daughter and not, kill her and have another child. Might I also mention that China, as Peter mentioned before me, China also implemented in the previous years a Care for Girls program, which is trying to eliminate discrimination, gender discrimination, and is educating and spreading awareness in primary school children. Okay, if we move on to the age structure now, we say that, no thank you, that there is a worse problem than a country having too many old people. That overpopulation is simply a worse problem. Because we think that having an improper balance of old and young people can be solved, while we're in overpopulation, everything simply ends. So we think that we think that it's worse to have than less workers, to have too many workers, a gazillion infinity of workers, cause poverty, slums, crime, everything. So yes, we think it's not so catastrophic, and might I also mention, as also Peter said, that within the policy, all provinces except Henan in China also have within this policy a regulation that the only child can then have 2 children. So it is not as strict and horrible and disastrous as it seems, but it is needed for solving the overpopulation. Yes.
Yes, the problem you mentioned about the overpopulation is the pollution. So I'm going to say that Chinese should be deprived of the right of giving birth to more than 1 child just because they are breathing and causing CO2 like everybody says.
Yes, because sir, they just might be along with USA the biggest polluter in the world. That is an example, that shows you how they are also more responsible for the pollution than everyone else on the planet, and they also contribute to 1/5 of the world's population. So the responsibility, we think, is justified to be on them. Okay, so if we move along to justification of this, if we're weighing the 2 options, of overpopulation and disasters that would bring, compared to minor problems that come along with this policy, we just say, no, thank you, we have to sacrifice those minor problems for the greater good, and eventually, when we figure out other solutions, slowly, switch to 2 per family, 3 per family, things like that. But right now, we think this is still very, very necessary. And in the end, we have also heard something about other solutions from the last 2 speakers of the proposition. We've heard how in Thailand and in Indonesia, people solved it with raising awareness about contraception and things like that. But we think that first of all they have a different mentality, since Chinese are known to have a rooted mentality of traditional how it's better to have more children, and how they also want to have more children to, I don't know, for example, help with the farm or something like that, which would mean child labor and things like that. So yes, we think this is a different example, and there's no real assurance that if we would say, this is contraception, use it wisely, we think people would still just have as many children as they wanted. So we see that this wouldn't solve the problem of massively growing the population explosion that is going on in China. So we think that this policy is a prevention of social, economical, and ecological disaster, and you should definitely oppose this motion.